Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walking Together podcast. We got a special guest today. We got Mr. Jacob Batts hanging out with us this morning. Is it still morning? It's still morning. 30 more minutes. So we're kind of continuing with the it's kind of an important kind of subject of why it's important to walk together, and kind of it ties in with the mission statement that we have of the gathering of loving God, living Jesus, walking together. I don't have it pulled up on my phone, but Kyle, would you like to read so we had a submission of a question, which we encourage. If anybody feels like they want a question asked, just because you submit it doesn't mean we're going to answer it, but it just might happen.
It just might. Yeah, like this one. All right, so the question that came in is, we hear people say, I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. While this may be true, why is it better if you do? And I will say the asker of the question gets extra points for making it rhyme. So if you can make your question rhyme, you get extra points.
Yeah, there's a better chance we'll answer it if it rhymes.
Right.
I feel like there's a lot of kind of witty statements about that kind of thing,
right,
about going to church, and they're like, well, can you be? What's one Can you still call yourself a something if you don't do something?
That's perfect. I love it.
No, but
no, just
can you call yourself a pickle if you don't have vinegar? I don't know, man.
So we're going.
I've heard the reverse of that. Going to church. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian. Just like sitting in a garage doesn't make you a car. So I've heard the reverse of it, but
yeah. So on Wednesday nights of going through the 7 last sayings of Christ on the cross, a lot of times it's easy to miss the point of, well, the criminal. If we don't know anybody that got into heaven, we know the criminal on the cross got into heaven,
right?
And if he got in and he didn't go to church, then
why should I?
Right.
He might have, man. I know a lot of criminals that go to church.
What?
I mean, it's true.
But the point there was displaying Jesus's grace, God's grace and mercy, and Jesus's atonement for sin more than let me slide in here by the seat of my pants. Let me chance it,
Right.
What's the heart motive for not going to, I'm going to not go to church for
at some point over those
certain reason
3 hours, while Jesus was on the cross and it begins to get dark from 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, criminal had a change of heart, and he realized who Jesus was, and he was like, truly, you are the Son of God. And,
because he was clowning on him at first.
Right. So I said all that to say, God's grace is big enough for you, bigger than your sin. But while you're here, that doesn't mean, I can, like you said, it's a heart condition. And if you've been told the truth, and a lot of times only you and God know when you're blatantly not being obedient to it.
Yeah. Well, coming from the surfing culture, a lot of people, I've heard numerous people say the ocean is my church, whatever, and they would claim that they believe everything that we believe in, but they don't feel like they need to go to church to express that, and they can have church in the ocean. Which I don't disagree.
That's partly true, right? We're not saying you have to come to this building to do church.
Yeah.
But you do need to be around people, because
that's right.
If now that Jesus has resurrected and gone back to heaven and given us His Spirit, and our body is the temple of the Lord, then the body of people is what the church is. So yeah, you can have church on the beach, you can have church in the ocean, but do you have people around you
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the. Yeah,
Or
'cause,
are you
some people,
just saying, I'm going to go do what I want to do, and when I'm out there in the water surfing, I count that as church. So
Yeah.
I don't have to do the things that might make me uncomfortable.
Like, what is the actual intent of, like, when you're out there? Like, are you just out there to have fun? Like, are you out there, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, is it to glorify God, or is it just to say that? Like,
yeah,
I kind of see with, like, I'm younger and I have the opportunity I have a lot of younger friends, and I'm starting to realize now that I have the opportunity to share church and share a lot of the things I've learned. And I get to talk with you guys, and I kind of get to learn all these different things. And I'm trying to share that with my younger friends, because I see that some of them are like trailing off. I'm just trying to give them my advice and my point of view, and kind of invite them to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it could be looked at. Yeah, I think it's easy to have a skewed version of what the definition of church is.
Right.
And I always like how, Bobby kind of twitches on the word church, and he doesn't really like it a whole lot, but it, for good reason. Like it provokes a lot of kind of misconceptions that people have about what church means. And if that word ecclesia or is like more properly translated as a gathering of people, then who's to say that it has to look like a church where you've got a big band playing and then you've got 500 people sitting there? I don't think there's a number associated with the people in that building that all of a sudden makes it, I'm going to church now. Like, who's to say that that I'm sure in the New Testament, in the beginning of in Acts, like some of those house gatherings, like they were maybe only a dozen people. It doesn't really say how many, but like a Bible study, like who's to say that if you don't go to a couple of Bible studies a week like that, I think that would be appropriately saying, well, that's where I get my church fix. So it's like, what for me, it's like, I think it's the intention. Like when I'm going and doing that thing that I call quote unquote church, what am I doing? Like what's actually happening there? Is it just a cop out to not be around other believers and to be challenged in my faith? Because we can never, there's plenty of people that would claim to be Christian, but they've never, they think the book of, they think the Gospel of Matthew is a book about some dude named Matthew, and not even not even the Gospel of Jesus. So, it's like, it's like, what are you,
Right.
what are you doing that for?
Right. Absolutely. Because I think, a lot of people still have the misconception, especially people who either aren't Christians or have never really been to church, think that the pointed building is what makes it church.
And makes you a Christian.
Right. And it's not in the slightest. We see in Scripture a lot of different examples of different house churches, different everything. And I think, how would you define church then?
If you give me a second, it talks about it in Acts.
I'll throw a cuff one while he's looking up that verse. I would just say like Christian Surfer Bible Study could be church, because you're sitting there and you're a group of people and you're sitting down and you're reading the Bible together and you're learning God's commandments. Before Jesus left, his commandments was go and make disciples and teach them to obey my commandments.
Right.
And baptizing them as well is thrown in there. So that in my mind is the mission of the quote church. And so if you're doing that in any setting, then that's church in my opinion.
Yeah.
But bands and cool music obviously make it more fun.
Right. I wouldn't say they're necessary though.
No, but it's not necessary. Exactly. Right.
There's a lot of things that we've put on the list as necessary things to call a church, and it's just not it's not mandated.
Well, and even Yeah, and there's even, and I haven't looked into a lot of it, but there's at least one high profile worship leader now that seems like she's coming out with a lot of stuff like, hey, this is like it has gotten to the point to where this worship and this giant show of worship has created the definition of church, and it's not about that. And so I don't know.
Right.
Have you seen those interviews of was it Stephanie Gretzinger?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, it's a topic that I've read into a lot about. I mean, because up until this year, I'd led worship for 14 years.
Yeah.
And so I've heard a lot of people ask for like worship to be done in their Bible studies because they want it to be more like a house church. And I'm like, well, you don't have to have me come and play guitar for it to be church.
Yeah.
Like you can do it without. You can sing. I think Paul had a church service while he was singing in his jail cell. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or, I mean, do you have to sing to have church? Like, can you still have a sandwich without mayonnaise? It makes it better.
It does.
But can you still call it a sandwich?
Right. And so I think that's why I think it has to go back to the motivation, even the definition, right? Like it's got to go back to the motivation. Because if your motivation is to
sing songs to make yourself feel better?
Right. Or is it to have everybody's hearts pointed towards God and primed to learn, primed to take in Scripture, right? Church is more about having a like-minded group of people who have the same goal for that time.
And just being in communion with each other, like what Jordan said, the iron sharpens iron thing, just being in a community of like-minded people and just helping each other grow, kind of.
Absolutely.
I think that's a big point, other than just, I mean, reading your Bible and staying at home and focusing on the one-on-one relationship with God is great as well. But in order to, I think, advance, you have to see other people's perspectives and like other people's, what they're going through, and just help each other, basically.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you find it, Nick?
It doesn't give, like, just from doing quick search, there are scriptures in Acts, like in Acts chapter 19 and in Ephesians 5 and in Ephesians 6, that talks about the body.
Yeah.
And Paul talking about how, God's Spirit dwelling in us makes us, that's where the temple resides now.
Right.
Because Jesus, said, I'm going to tear down the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, meaning it's going to be through him.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you can take it anywhere. Kind of like they did with the tabernacle. And,
right.
But it's not a physical thing. So
it's not location-based.
Ecclesia, which is the Greek word for the term church, means called out.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle's worship group that used to be called Out Band.
Yep.
Church band.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people knew that.
Yeah.
Because when you just say called out, it doesn't. But you're just saying church band in a way.
Right. And what's funny, it was, so I had to share more of this later, but it's neat how that has been a word and phrase that's been carried on throughout a lot of my time in ministry. Because I was part of a church plant for a little while called Ecclesia, and then went from that to leading Called Out, and was like, oh, okay.
Did you come up with the name of Called Out Band, or did somebody else?
I didn't.
It's Destiny.
I don't know who that is.
So, like all of you have said, commented, everybody has different flavors of how to do that. But I think there's some central things of you're coming together to build each other up. Right. You're coming together to get the truth from the Creator,
right,
who made it, right?
Right.
And you can do that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But in time, the reason there's so many, like let's say the 5 of us decide, hey, let's start getting together and doing that because we're not doing it. And then we start bringing our families in, and then we start bringing our brothers and cousins. And the reason we have a building is it is a blessing from the Lord to be able to come together and worship together.
Right.
It doesn't matter necessarily if it's 5 people or 1,000.
Right.
Because in Acts, just like, once a year they come together for Passover festival. When they did church there in Jerusalem, there was thousands of people.
Right.
But then they went back to their homes and did house church, and it might have been 5 people.
Right.
It doesn't, like I said, it's all the intention of the heart. So just because if I like worshiping with 5,000 people, that doesn't mean that Jacob, for example, worshiping with 5 people on the beach is different or bad or good or
Right.
So if people would just let go of their preferences, I think we wouldn't have such a hard time getting along with everybody's flavor of how to do church.
Right. So what would you say to the person who still just they are a Christian, they profess Christ, there's fruit in their lives, but even a group of 5 just not going to do it?
Not going to go to church?
Yeah.
Or not going to...
So they don't go to a Bible study. They don't go to church.
Yep.
Because
I think that's what the kind of the heart of
Yeah,
the question
so
is, right?
I know we've kind of defined church, but getting back to the original question of why it's good to be a part of church,
Right.
a body of people.
Yeah. Because, I mean, honestly, the first verses that came to mind as the first ones I mentioned to y'all was the Hebrews 10, right? 24 and 25. And this is Proverbs. Give me one second. Need some Jeopardy theme music. Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Is that trademarked or copyrighted?
Probably. I'm going to get a copyright
Yeah,
strike.
edit that out.
All right, it says, the header of this section is the full assurance of faith in ESV. So it builds faith, right? And you're able to have assurance in that. But verses 24 and 25 say, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. And here's the key verse, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Right? So there's an emphasis on being together. And he rebukes those who stray from it. He says, don't neglect to meet together, as is the habit of some. So he's recognizing that there are people at that time and will be many more people who try to do the same thing and try to be the lone wolf Christian, right? And he's rebuking that and telling them, hey, it's important to be together.
Yeah. Well, it seems more like, maybe part rebuke, but it seems more just like an encouragement. And it uses the word encouragement. It's like not the sole purpose, but a part of the purpose of that whole thing of meeting together is to encourage one another. And everybody's probably heard it, that, they use the metaphor of a bunch of coals together. You got a bunch of pieces of charcoal for a grill or whatever, and you take one and you just put it aside, it's going to burn out faster.
Right.
Is it possible to keep that coal hot and going by itself? Sure, it is, but you got to blow on it a bunch, and there's a lot more effort,
right,
I guess, that goes into it, and so I think the encouragement of meeting together is that iron sharpens iron. We're able to encourage one another. If I'm just going lone wolf and I'm having a tough day and I don't have anybody to talk to, I've been talking to the side. I don't have anybody to talk to and share with, and somebody that also pursues God and has can provide some godly wisdom.
Right.
Then I'm just hanging out with people that could give some pretty terrible worldly wisdom that might sound good, but it's just based off of worldly, fleshly things.
Right.
You know, like you're having a tough time with your old lady and somebody gives you some terrible advice, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you can go south real quick
Oh, yeah.
because you get fleshly and, you know, or your kids or, you know, whatever, like work.
Right.
You know, it's not hard to find a lack of integrity in decision making these days, or in, you know, I think just forever. And so I think that encouragement, that I think part of that scripture was, hey, like y'all need to hang out together so y'all can encourage one another to keep pursuing, like what Jacob said, like I want to help my friends pursue God
Right.
instead of pursuing all the other things that the world has to offer, that in the end are empty and have no meaning.
Right.
Yep.
That Hebrews, one translation of that Hebrews verse says to spur one another along.
Yeah.
And I like it because it reminds me, like, I need a good kick in the tail every once in a while, you know, to get me going.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have people around you, nobody's going to be like, hey, Nick, man, you come on.
Yep. Without accountability, it's easy to become apathetic. Just to coast, you know.
Well, that goes back to, you know,
You call me pathetic.
God give us, Ephesians chapter 4 explains why being together, unified as one, is good. So if you're listening to this, take about 2 minutes to read Ephesians chapter 4. It'll tell you. And I'll tell you a couple verses in there. But you talking about just coasting goes back to the whole thing of like, if you get in a river without a paddle
Mm.
and you just go wherever, James talks about it, wherever the wind and waves take you, you're going to get tossed around,
Mhm.
confused, jerked around all the time, and you're not going to know what in the world to do.
You end up in the rapids mighty quick.
Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says...
Do you know the name of that creek?
That creek?
Yeah, that you're in without a paddle. Sorry, go ahead.
You're provoking me to say something.
We just had that podcast. I was testing you. Good job. You passed.
He's spurring you on to good works.
I wanted to. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 says, Therefore, I, a prisoner, for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Called out. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace.
Mm.
For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. So just in those first 4 verses, Paul is telling you why, when you're together and you are making allowance for each other's faults and being humble and gentle like Jesus,
Mhm.
who is our representation, right? And you're making every effort to do that, then peace is the only thing that binds us together, and the only place we can get true peace from is God's Spirit, right?
Yep.
So these are the fruits, qualities, benefits of being together
Mm-hmm.
and doing those things for each other.
Yeah.
Well, I know when I'm not together, when I'm by myself, I start thinking it's harder for me to be humble and gentle and peaceful because I'm not reminded that where these things come from. And
Right.
you're getting that fix-it mentality.
Yeah.
But if you keep reading, Paul goes through, the gifts God has given us, some to teach, some to preach, some to be apostles, some to their responsibility as teachers and pastors to equip people to do God's work. And this will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ.
Mm.
That's a benefit of being together.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're going to be more like Christ, and
Right.
Christ was sinless, perfect. So if you want to be better, you want to understand those qualities, then being around people
Absolutely.
that are going after the same thing is only going to help.
Yep.
Last thing I'll say about it. Somebody told me this, and it's always stuck with me, just like all the other analogies of up a creek without a paddle, and you can be in a garage, but that don't mean you're a car, and all that is not going to church and saying you're a Christian is like being married and not living together.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it.
But why?
Right. You can do it that way, but you're making it harder for yourself.
Right.
And we're not saying you have to come to this brick building.
Right.
But for me, God providing this awesome resource, this building where we can come together and worship together and eat together and have classes together, and my kids learn,
Mhm.
and it's just a benefit. Don't
Right.
have to be done that way,
Right.
but it makes it easier for me
Absolutely.
to try to raise my kids and learn how to be a husband and a father and a pastor and all those things.
Yeah. And I think it's something that we take for granted too. Is how many people do you think over in places in the world where it's illegal, churches, Christianity is illegal, do you think they would rather be in a place that has a church? They're seeking community,
yeah.
you know?
Well, a lot of you thrive under pressure or persecution, and
Right.
I'm sure a lot of Christians in other countries laugh at us at the things we argue about because we don't have that
Right.
constant threat, pressure, persecution. So we get hung up on things that don't really matter.
Right. And we become that house divided that won't stand.
Well, and that's what ends up getting people to even have that thought of, I don't need to go to church
Right.
because it's not a place that I feel welcomed at, or, that portrays Christ in a good way.
Yeah.
Doesn't do the Corinthians, doesn't love one another.
Right.
Doesn't, they do all these things, but they don't do it with love, or they, fall short on the loving part.
See, and that's where I think people need to be spurred on to actually join in and try and be the cause of change.
Yeah.
Then too, right? Sometimes if you don't see what you like, you got to be the person to fix it. Not saying all times, but sometimes.
Yeah.
That's what God's calling you to do.
Well, I remember at one point in, I guess, the earlier years of my faith, I was embarrassed to to use the word I'm a Christian, and not because I was ashamed of Christ, but I knew all of the misconceptions that I had on what a Christian meant before I became a Christian. I was like, in my mind, whenever somebody would say I'm a Christian, I already had all these preconceived notions about that person.
Right.
And they were automatically a fuddy-duddy, judgy person or something, and then once I finally had that experience, a positive church, quote unquote, church experience, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that this is a thing, that you can seek God, and with Hebrews 4, the last part of Hebrews 4 talks about approaching the throne approaching God boldly, because of, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, approaching God boldly, knowing that there's grace.
Yeah.
Like confidently, like you're going there confidently and boldly, knowing that there's grace attached to it. But anyways, yeah, unfortunately, there's just a lot of bad Christianity, and church gets a bad rap, from all kinds of reasons, for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
Well,
and so being a part of helping to change that, and
Right.
I guess the point I was getting to, I didn't make it, but learning that I don't have to be ashamed to call myself Christian, and I should use the word Christian, and I'm not afraid to use the word church, because I want to help be a part of changing what that means
Right.
for people, not changing it to a new thing, but almost kind of like redeeming it back for what its intention is for.
Yeah.
So I ain't so scared no more.
I think you got to take the initiative if you really want to further your relationship. And I think God will put certain people in that church and certain people that will help you. Like, I have older, I don't know if I want to call them mentors, but just older people who are wise. And I think God put them in my life because I'm younger. I'm still trying to figure it out, different things. And I'm still going through these things. But like Nate who goes to youth group here, he definitely knows what he's talking about. And he's been through a lot of different things. And I think he can truly help people like me. And if you're lost and wondering, just don't be afraid to go out. If you're unsure, don't be afraid to go out and talk to different people. You can't be scared. You just got to kind of like ask God for confidence, and just don't be afraid to go out and get it.
Absolutely.
Amen.
I like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're all trying to figure it out, but
Yeah.
every day.
That's the truth.
Well, that's
is
where
the
the
truth.
humbleness has to, admit where you're at and don't be scared.
Yep. And then I got one last thing to say.
Come on.
If being a Christian is trying to be more like Christ hung out with 12 dudes for 3 years, and they had church.
There was a lot more than 12. Though.
There was, but his circle,
Yeah.
disciples, hung out with 12 dudes.
He had 12 close friends.
Yep.
It's more super close friends than I have.
Right.
I don't know if I could count like 12 super close friends. Maybe I could. I think I can. Never mind. I take that back. I'm sorry to all those 12 close friends. My bad. Everybody that's listening, like, wait a minute.
Wait, am I?
Am I one of the 12?
Yeah. I don't know. I heard this guy, there's this like Jewish rabbi, Christian guy. I don't know. I haven't listened to enough about it, but I heard this. I heard him. No, I'm sorry. There's this guy that did the little short, and he was talking about if Jesus came today, nobody would recognize him because even when he was alive, only 12 people followed him. Like,
Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm pretty
Huh?
sure more than 12 people followed him.
Yeah.
Like the Bible says thousands of people followed him around. That's why he had to feed 5,000 because those
Right.
dudes were following him around and they didn't have anything to eat.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
they had church.
They
Jesus,
did.
Jesus had church.
Yeah.
They had thousands. He was the biggest mega church probably the world's ever seen.
Yeah, if you look back at Jesus, sometimes he met with 12, sometimes he met with 5,000. I mean,
Right.
don't get so hung up on it has to look a certain way.
Right. But the point is just do it.
Yeah.
You think they had church at Zacchaeus' house?
Probably. It was a short church.
Short service?
Short
They had
service.
dinner.
Yeah. But I mean, that was my last thing is like, that would be my question for anybody, and it would come off the wrong way. So I don't know, maybe do it with people that you're good friends with, but like, don't consider yourself better than Jesus. Like Jesus hung out with people and had church.
And I'm sure you have to remember, Jesus got betrayed
Right.
in that. So I'm sure everybody's had their feelings hurt by somebody.
Right. Don't let it keep you away though.
Right. Don't let it keep you from, try again. Practice forgiveness.
Yep.
Humbleness, because that's where peace starts to come from.
Absolutely. Well, fellas, I think we wrapped that up.
Yeah.
All right.
Ready? All right. Jacob, thank you for being here today,
Thank you
man.
for having me.
Yeah.
Great to have you. And here we go. Alrighty, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the Walking Together podcast. It's been another fun one, getting to answer questions and just talk about important stuff. So, if you have a question that you would like to have answered, you can send it in and to us by visiting gatheringsurfcity.com/podcasts. It'll take you to a page that has all the podcasts that are available through the Gathering. And if you click on the Walking Together podcast, it'll pull up another page where you can submit a question, hear previous episodes, and find all the info about the Walking Together podcast that you might want. Another way that you can do it, though, is you can actually email us at podcasts, plural, at gatheringsurfcity.com. You can send in your question there, and we'll get it, and we just might talk about it on the next episode. So, again, y'all, it's been great hanging out with you. Thank you for listening in and tuning in, and we will see you. Well, hear you, talk to you. We'll talk to you next time. Later.